Welcome, everybody, to the Sheridan Report, brought to you by MyBookie.Ag. To find out more about MyBookie.Ag and to get up to 100% cash bonus on your first $300 deposit, up to $300, make sure you go to thegruelingtruth.com, click on the banner at the top of the page. It'll take you right there. You can also go to MyBookie.Ag and use the promo code TGT100. I am your co-host for the Sheridan Report, Mike Goodpasser. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host from the Sheridan Report himself, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Good morning, Mike. I'm doing great. I'm feeling rested and ready to go. Have a great Monday.
All right, so let's have a great Monday. We'll start off with what? Major League Baseball?
Yeah, let's start Major League Baseball, Mike. We have three straight plays this evening. One of them is a top play, and then I have three mix and match, three-team parlay. We hit our three-teamer yesterday. It paid almost 5-1, so maybe that thing's ready to get hot finally, and we'll go over all that right now for you. So let's hit those mix and match first. Three-teamer. We've got three games we like. We've hooked together, and that thing, when I put it in last night, it paid $3.54. This morning it went up a little bit because the lines on the favorites came down a little bit. So this morning it was $3.76. So pretty good payoff, just less than 4-1. And the three teams are the Nationals, Mets, and Astros. Those are all in the 4 o'clock hour. And you've got Zach Wheeler going, who has really turned into their ace. This is a pretty good story with DeGrom's issues going on, Syndergaard's issues. Zach Wheeler, all of a sudden, has become an ace for them. Him and Mets yesterday, and we had Mets. So those two guys are getting the job done for the Mets. So that's pretty easily interpreted there. And then you've got also in the 4 o'clock hour, I'm looking here, you've got the Astros with Verlander at Minnesota. We like them in that spot, of course. And then to finish off, the third game was I didn't go over was the Nationals, and that's with their left-handed pickup Patrick Corbin, who's really come out of the gate pitching well for them, and I think he'll be able to cool down the Cardinal bats. And Washington's at home there, so there's your three-teamer. Now, the three straight plays. Top play I really like tonight, Mike, is the Colorado Rockies. They're playing the Brewers, and this is a rematch of the National League Division Series last year where the Brewers swept the Rockies, and I think it's going to be a different story in this series. Colorado is playing very, very good baseball right now, among the best in the major leagues, especially when you look at some numbers. And they're sitting out their ace today, Kyle Freeland, who was a 17-game winner a year ago, and he's coming off some blister issues. He's been out. He missed 2 starts, and to heal that up, and he's declares himself good to go. And these guys, when they have these blister issues and they are then fine, they're fine. I don't see this being a problem for him tonight at all. I think he'll throw the ball great, and he's going against a Brewer lineup that is likely to be without Christian Yelich. Yelich has some back issues tonight, and he's listed as questionable. And it looked to me when I read everything that he was going to get the night off from counsel, not press it. So that's one less, one big bet he doesn't have to deal with. And I think they're ready to go in there and take this series. So this would be a good way to start with their ace on the mound. And they're plus 104. So that's a nice little small dog spot there. Then the other two side bets we have are the Padres, who are also hitting the ball and playing very good. They come off of a really nice weekend series in Washington. And they're sending a young kid named Nick Margevicius to the mound. And he's got a shot in this game. The Padres have a big shot. They play well in Atlanta. And they're really becoming an upstart team so far in this young season. I think a lot of people expected them to play around 500 baseball, and that's kind of what I expected, and I kind of hoped, selfishly, because we know that they're coming and their roster's building, and I was hoping maybe Bochy or Socia would get that job next year. But if this guy keeps winning, he might not lose it, and I think he'll win today. And then the last game tonight is a sneaky play for me. I liked Baltimore. They're in Chicago to play the White Sox, and they're throwing their best pitcher. I've watched tape on this guy the last 2 starts. John Means, outstanding changeup, one of the best changeups in the league. and he's going to be a tough guy to deal with tonight. And Baltimore has a big shot in this game with John Means. So there you go, Mike.
All right, so how about this? What if you did a three-teamer with the Padres, the Rockies, and the Astros?
Padres would be your nice dog. Rockies would be the top play, and then hook it up with the Astros. That's mixing and matching. That I love that, because you take one of the three, maybe the best of the three you like, of the three in the parlay, and you hook them up with two of the straight plays, and that's a really nice payoff.
Yeah, it's a little over it's almost 6-1 right now.
Yeah, that's a very, very good payoff just with two of the three straights.
Right.
I've been doing a lot of stuff like that, especially because you find that you get into a rut where maybe all three of those favorites don't come through, and but you're hitting two of them, you're consistently hitting two of the three. You can still make money using those. Hook them up with your other stuff.
Alrighty, Bobby. You want to go look at the NHL a little bit?
Yeah, there's one game tonight that I wanted you to go over with us, Mike. I know you've had an outstanding record with these playoffs, and I wanted your opinion, and the fans to have your opinion on the St. Louis Blues Dallas Stars game tonight.
All right. The Blues, I don't think, are playing their best. And to be honest, when you looked at them, every time they've played against the Stars, you could say that this season. Secondary scoring so far has looked flat. You can't really expect Vladimir Tarasenko to score every goal, and you can't hope every goal comes on a power play. It's not helping that the Blues can only focus on one line at a time, apparently, because they are doing a decent job of corralling Jaime Benn, Tyler Seguin, guys like that. My big problem here is they're going to Dallas. I thought the Blues would win this series going in. I'm not so sure now, because the Blues seem to not be able to get out of their own way. They don't seem to be able to have any flow. So the Blues are a slight dog. I like the Stars tonight, though, but I just don't know if there's enough value there to bet it.
Yeah, maybe not straight minus 117 or 125 on MyBookie, but hooking them up, mixing and matching with your Verlander or with two of those three that you like, or with the top play of the Rockies, you can definitely find a place to put them.
All right, Bobby. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at the NBA.
All right, Mike. Well, this is probably the headliner of the night. For a lot of fans, they love basketball, and the NBA playoffs are definitely heating up. And that Rockets game yesterday was the best overnight line, viewing-wise, in 5 years in the NBA. I just read that. So many people are interested in the Rockets and Warriors and the NBA in general. And sports betting is taking off as well. I think it's helping a lot of these numbers. You look at Major League Baseball across the board is up. The basketball, of course, is up. The hockey is up. That Bruins game the other day in their series was outdid the Celtics. And the thing that I read said that was not abnormal for a Bruins game to outdo the Celtics, but it was a pretty significant number. And that's neat. And I think sports betting, is having a little bit of an effect on the ratings right now. But okay, a little sidebar there. But let's go to tonight's game. Top play. There's two games tonight, and I have an opinion on one of the games. That's the Trailblazers and the Nuggets. I do think the Nuggets have an opportunity here to come out of the gate based on the fact that they're just coming off of a series where they were at home, at least in the game 7, where they won that. They won it with their defense, and they have one day off, of course, used to prepare somewhat for however they can for this Trailblazer team coming in. And Portland's had the rest in the 5-6 days or 4 or 5 days since Lillard hit that half-court shot, but yet they didn't know their opponent. So they stayed in basketball shape, of course, but did not know their opponent. But I think having not played for 5 days, I think that's a disadvantage. Do you have any feelings on this, Mike? Because you see this in series sometimes where one team has a lot of rest.
I don't know. I like the Blazers. I just think they're better. I don't think that the Nuggets played real well against the Spurs. The game 7 was one that stuck out to me where I think they should have ended that game probably in the first quarter as badly as the Spurs were playing, and they didn't.
Totally agree, yeah.
I think this. I think this game is a must-win for the Nuggets because if they lose game one at home, I think they're in a lot of trouble. Portland's really good at home. I really like Portland in this entire series. I think they're going to win this series in 4 or 5 games, Bobby.
Wow. Well, okay, I agree. I do think Portland is going to win the series. I do. I am with you there, and I was against Denver in as the fans know. We had San Antonio in that series, and we were lucky to cover that Game 7, Mike. I mean, that was a big game for me personally. It was a top play. I had a lot of stuff that was ending with the Spurs parlay-wise, and it was a big moneymaker for me on Saturday. But Denver should have had them blown out by the half, and definitely by the end of the third, and they left him in the game, and Portland San Antonio had the lucky cover. But what I mean specifically is Game 1, I agree, Denver must win this game to have a shot to win the series. And I think Portland is the better team and is going to take this series. But I do think Game 1, they're a little bit susceptible to going down 0-1. I think the Nuggets have a little bit of an edge in this game, and I'll probably be on it small, nothing significant on Denver.
All right, Bobby. What do you want to go with? Do we have anything else, or did you want to talk about anything
We
else
do.
NBA-wise? Okay.
We do, because I have a top play that I held for last. Mike, I love the 76ers tonight. That's against a lot of people's thinking, and if you watch Game 1, Toronto was a juggernaut. They looked like they could win the whole thing, especially with Milwaukee dropping the first game and not looking very well, good against Boston. And I don't think that they would be wrong in thinking that Toronto looks like they now, could be a title contender. They're very good. But the thing is, these series evolve, and we all know this is not going to be an easy series for Toronto at all. And I think Game 1 for me was, okay, let's watch and see what's happening here. So both teams dominated their first round, and Philadelphia, I've been telling everybody, is a wild card with Embiid and with really this their best lineup, their A lineup, as when it's played on the court together, it's something like 17-2. They've only had about 19 games together. That's with Harris, that's with Embiid on the court, that's with everybody playing their role. And so we know this is a very good team. They've got to find ways to how they're going to attack Toronto, because Toronto is absolutely opposite of New Jersey in the problems that they pose offensively and defensively. And Philadelphia, I think, needs, to be given a break on that first round, that first game where they they did get blown out. But if you look at take away the first quarter, they lost that by 8. The next 3 quarters, they lost by 2, 1, and 2, something like that. The final was only about 15. When Toronto went on that big run in the first half and they hit 14 straight shots, Mike. And, at one point after that 14 straight, the score was 43-42 Toronto. And they never blew them out. You're getting 6.5 points. So the adjustments, I feel, are going to be better made in favoring Philadelphia in terms of adjustments than Toronto. I think Philadelphia's got some things that they learned from Game 1, and I think that they can apply those. And here's another thing. Joel Embiid is the leader of their team, and he's a bit funky, a bit whatever. He's a smart guy. He's a dominant player. And he came out, and what I loved is when he said, you know what, this is on me. I've got to do a better job. I've got to be more dominant. I've got to, play better. I've got to impose my will on this series more if we're going to beat this team, because this team's really good, Toronto. And I like that. I mean, young guy that comes out and says that after a Game 1 loss, that's pretty good leadership. And we know that this team is talented, and they pose some problems of their own because they're very unique in how they play. So I like the Sixers tonight in Game 2. I think this is going to swing back in their direction. And I can't say that I would tout the straight up, the money line at plus 243, but I do have some on that. But I have a nice size bet on the plus 6.5, Mike.
All right, Bobby. What do you got for on this day?
Okay, on this day, we've got a lot of good choices, but there's one I think that stands out over the others just because of, well, what you're going to tell us. 1961, on this day, ABC's Wide World of Sports made its debut.
Yeah, and I think it made its debut with like the Penn and Drake relay races, which was track and field. But the interesting thing about Wide World of Sports is this is before cable TV, before ESPN, and when you look at the influence they had, I mean, the influence is mind-boggling because they were the first U.S. television program to show Wimbledon, which they showed in 1961. They started doing a longer form version of the Indianapolis 500 in 1965. They showed the first nationally televised NCAA men's basketball championship in 1962. 1962, the Daytona 500, the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, the Monaco Grand Prix, the Little League World Series in 1961, which I think ABC still shows to this day. The British Open Golf Tournament, they were the first ones to show the X Games in 1994, the CFL's Super Bowl, the Grey Cup in 1962, and they spun off into a lot of different events too, where Wild World of Sports covered a bowling event in 1961, and the broadcast was so successful that in 1962, ABC Sports began covering the Pro Bowlers Tour. And I remember actually watching that in the 70s and early 80s when I was a kid. They also, 1964, they covered the Oklahoma Rattlesnake Hunt Championships. The following year, because of that program and how well the Rattlesnake Hunt Championships went, they premiered The American Sportsman, which was a show that remained on the network for 20 years. 1973, you remember the old Superstars, where they would take, like TV stars and boxers, football players, and had the competition. 1973, they started that. The next year, it went to be a weekly winners series that lasted in prime time up for a decade. Howard Cosell, Muhammad Ali, those were all people who were on Wide World of Sports. And Wild World of Sports died out in the late 90s because of the proliferation where everything was shown everywhere by the time you get to the late 90s. But I remember watching motorcycles, is it motorcycles? Motorcycles, race on ice in the 1970s. And then, of course, probably the greatest American sports hero of all time, Evel Knievel, used to be on ABC's Wide World of Sports. And I just remember when you hear the voice of Jim McKay, you'd know it's a big deal. They had all kind of boxing on back then. Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes was on it. And the thing that used to drive me nuts is they'd have it on and, they'd have like figure skating. Plus Muhammad Ali's fighting, Ron Lyle or whatever. And you knew my dad would be like, well, there's no reason to sit there at 4 o'clock because, the boxing's not coming on till 5, and it never did until 5. And then when you look at the other sports, hurling, rodeo, curling, highlight, they used to have firefighters competitions, demolition derbies. I mean, they had a little bit of everything. Mexican cliff diving. I remember watching cliff diving on it. And it was just what they did was something that nobody had ever done, and it was really the precursor to what ESPN would do in 1979.
Yeah, Mike, this is unbelievable stuff. And their song that they would lead in to start the show, everybody's
Spanning the Globe.
I mean, if you're a sports, wow.
To bring you the constant variety of a sport. The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. I mean, it was just, and I think that was from a ski jumper who crashed in like 1970. And that footage played all the way up to the end of the show in 1998. And you look at the announcers, I mean, Jim McKay, Frank Gifford, John Saunders, Robin Roberts, Tim Brandt was on there. Remember Chris Economaki, Keith Jackson, Jim Lampley, Al Michaels, Brent Musburger, Paul Page, Kirk Gowdy, Frank Gifford, Jerry Punch, Chris Schenkel. Yeah, Al Troutwig. I mean, just about everybody that was anybody. And if you remember, it was kind of Wide World of Sports that would do the Indy 500, and they also something which we got coming up this weekend, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont. I think all three of them were on that show at one point also. So yeah, the effect that Wide World of Sports had is long ranging, and I think it's safe to say was very long lasting.
Yeah, and thinking of Cosell, and I wanted to ask you two things. It was the Cosell Ali relationship I wanted to ask you a little bit about, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more in depth about Evel Knievel. So if you can hit those a little bit more.
Well, Ali and Cosell. I mean, Ali wouldn't have been Ali without Cosell, and Cosell wouldn't have been Cosell without Ali. You could make the case that Muhammad Ali is why Monday Night Football got so big. And the reason I say that is Ali and Cosell started getting together in the early 60s. That's what made Cosell so big. You go to Monday Night Football, what made Monday Night Football was the group they had. Howard Cosell, Don Meredith, Frank Gifford. At the start you had Keith Jackson the first year, and then it blew up, and it blew up because Howard Cosell was a superstar at that point. I don't think there's any announcer to this day that has ever been more famous or infamous at the same time. So
Yeah.
when you look at those guys, yeah, he was a polarizing figure. Ali was a polarizing figure, and to put those two guys together at the same time, you had a white Jewish lawyer, you had an African American athlete who was fighting against the United States government in an unjust war in Vietnam. I mean, it was just the perfect storm that put those guys together. And I think those two guys together what's made televised sports as big as what it is. So, yeah. And then
for sure. And then, the Evel Knievel, I can just remember the Grand Canyon, but he had like 4 or 5.
The Grand Canyon. I wish he'd have jumped that on a dirt bike or a Harley the way he was supposed to. That would have been a climatic finish. Not anticlimactic. It would have been him scraping him up off the bottom of the Snake River Canyon. But I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, the three most iconic figures were Ali, Elvis, Evel Knievel. And I remember one of my greatest gifts I ever got for Christmas would have been like 1974 or so, where I got the Evel Knievel. Remember, you could crank that thing up and make that damn bike with Evel Knievel go. I had the big van and everything that went with it. I absolutely loved Evel Knievel. When Evel Knievel was on, the whole world stopped. I remember the last time he was on Wide World of Sports, I think it was like 76, and he was jumping in like Kings Island. Or no, what it wasn't. I think it was Kings Island or Seattle. But it was on Halloween, and he's supposed to jump right at 6:00, and it runs over. And trick or treating goes from 6 to 8 where I live, and I was supposed to be trick or treating with my sister, and my mom was going to walk us up the street, how everybody did back then, and I refused to go until I saw whether Evel Knievel made it or if he crashed. So Evel Knievel was somebody that even superseded Halloween trick-or-treat for this 8-year-old.
Yeah, that's it. And I remember he dressed up like Elvis. He had put on those capes and he had those glasses. And
yeah, he was. And this is the thing. The thing about Ali, Elvis, and Evel Knievel that separates them from everybody else is they were bigger than life. If you go back before that, Babe Ruth was bigger than life. You don't get that anymore. I don't think Mike Trout is one of the greatest baseball players I think we'll ever see. But he's not bigger than life. And it's hard to be bigger than life when your life every day, 24/7, is being talked about and thrown out there. These guys were like mythical figures because you would see Ali in his fight. You would see Evel Knievel with his jump. But if you missed Evel Knievel's jump, it wasn't like you could go rewind and run to TiVo back and watch it. You'd missed it. So when he did something or when Ali fought, if you wanted to see it, you had to be there watching it as it happened. And I think that the lack of being able to watch a videotape in 1976 of something made it more mythical because you saw it, that's what happened. But, by a week later, talking about it with your friends, it became something even bigger than what you saw.
Right. Totally understand this.
Yeah,
There
and
was
we're,
no
we're
Twitter.
now, I mean, if
Yeah,
something happens, it gets replayed to death. They have a 3-hour post-game show for it, and it's just not what it used to be. But the thing that set those three apart, and really four, I'd throw Howard Cosell in there, is they were bigger than sports. I mean, if Ali was fighting or Evil Knievel was doing something or Elvis Presley was everybody knew about it. I remember where I was the day Elvis died. I remember where I was the day Evil Knievel didn't jump the Snake River Canyon successfully. And I remember where I was when Muhammad Ali beat Leon Spinks to get his title back. I remember, and this is the thing about it, like Ali Spinks, the second fight, that was watched by like 90 million people in this country, but like 3 billion worldwide, which was like 70% of the world's population saw him. That's how big he was. And there's nobody that's big like that anymore. And a lot of it was just the times, the Vietnam War, everything that happened in the 70s, and those guys became mythical figures. And ABC's Wild World of Sports had a lot to do with why those guys became mythical figures, except for Elvis, of course. I don't think he was ever on Wild World of Sports.
No, I don't think he was. But, man, your analysis is so good and so right on. And sometimes I wish we can go back to days like that. But, that's,
I always do, Bobby, because that would mean that I'm going to live a lot longer. But
all right, Mike. Thank you very much.
And then we
for
can
that.
fix all the stuff we screwed up.
Yep.
Nah.
Then we get one shot at it. So, hey, starting today, let's do it right.
Yeah, but the way I always looked at it is this. I'm happy with where I'm at, so why would I really want to do anything differently? Because doing something differently could put me in a whole different realm of where I am now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I want to be where I'm at right now. So I'm happy with things. So I like to look back,
right.
But I never go back and think, man, I should have done this differently. Because, if I do something differently, maybe I don't meet the woman I married. Maybe I don't have these kids.
Right.
Maybe, me and you don't know each other.
Everything. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why they're saying, things are it's meant to be, and you'll know later why. Sometimes we have setbacks, and you'll know later why, and it's overcoming the adversities and all that. And hey, today's a good birthday in Indiana. Reggie Miller turned 54 years old today. Reggie Miller.
Yeah, I like Reggie.
Yeah,
I got to meet
how about
Reggie.
This one, Mike?
So.
We don't talk about birthdays very much, but Jim Hart, he's the ex-quarterback.
St. Louis Cardinals. He was the first Cardinal that Eric Coryell, Don Coryell had in 1973. I think Coryell went there. And Jim Hart was a great passer when Don Coryell was there. He took the Cardinals, who hadn't been to the playoffs in a long time, not since they were in Chicago, took them to the playoffs back-to-back years. They lost to, I think, the Vikings one year, and they lost at the Rams the other year. But, yeah, Don Coryell completely changed what St. Louis football was at that time. And then he left, and then it went right back to being shit. So,
yeah, shows you what he.
But Jim Hart was a hell of a quarterback under different circumstances in a different city like New York or something. I mean, you're probably looking at a Hall of Fame quarterback because I think he was that good. If you look at the stats, they're nothing like you see from guys today. But the game was played a lot different back then than it is today.
And I want to mention one more thing, Mike. 1986, and this is because as long as I've been doing any of the shows with you, Surviving Advance or this show or anything, I don't think I've ever heard you ever speak about this, man. That's why I want to bring it up. 1986 NFL Draft. Auburn, this is on this day, Auburn running back Bo Jackson was the first pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bo Jackson. Any thoughts on Bo? Any quick thoughts on him, Mike?
It's a man that scored a touchdown in a Pro Bowl and hit a home run in the All-Star game. I mean, one of the greatest athletes that ever lived. The big question is, what would he have been if he doesn't get hurt? And I think the answer to that is this. If he doesn't get hurt, I think he probably plays 5 or 6 years in the NFL and then becomes a full-time baseball player because, let's face it, there's more money there. And I mean, he didn't always hit for the greatest average, but I think he's a guy that if he'd have concentrated on baseball, he could have been a stud.
Oh man, I just remember that home run he did in the All-Star game. Dead center field off Rick Whistle, and it was here in Anaheim Stadium, I believe. I think that game was played here in Southern California, and just unbelievable. And he was big time there with Nike. He would have just been. There's people walking around now, kids walking around. There's not a kid that hasn't heard of Michael Jordan, but there's many, 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 many that have never heard of Bo Jackson. And he would have been right up there with Michael Jordan.
You don't know Bo.
Forever.
I think Bo would have been bigger than Michael Jordan.
He might have been.
Because he was doing it in the NFL too. He was a Raider. I mean, if he would have got the Raiders farther, I mean, if he'd have won a Super Bowl with the Raiders, he'd have blown up huge. His career actually ended in a playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals because Kevin Walker,
right,
who's a friend of our show, who's been on a few times, tackled him from behind, displaced his hip, and he was never the same again. But yeah, it's actually that was the '87 All-Star game in Anaheim, right?
Yeah, '87.
So, yeah, because I was going to say because '86, yeah, because '85.
That might have been '89.
It might have been 80. Well, it was somewhere around there. It was somewhere.
It was 87 or '89, Mike. It might have been '89.
Because I know '88 was in Cincinnati, '85 was in Minnesota. I can't remember.
I know I was gone. I was gone, and I watched that with teammates and stuff. When I know I was somewhere doing baseball. It was '87 or '89.
All right, Bobby. We're going to go ahead and wrap
Mike,
it up.
Good stuff.
And I want to remind everybody, Inside Boxing Daily tonight, to start to break down the Canelo-Jacobs super fight. On Saturday, we'll have Daniel Cisneros, the author of Matt Tales' best-selling boxing book. He'll be on to talk a little boxing with us. Tonight, later on, we will have Cincinnati Bengals draft review show with myself. Hopefully, Joe Kelly will be able to join us. But we will have that show tonight, tomorrow at noon, with the president of the American Cornhole Organization, Frank Gears, will be on the show. That should be a ton of fun. And then me and Bobby will be back at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Remember to check out the handicapping guide. And we will have 8 o'clock Eastern on Friday night, a Kentucky Derby preview show. And we will have the handicapping guide on. We will help you try to make a little bit of money at Churchill Downs this weekend, so make sure you check us out there. And make sure you go check out the Sheridan Report at Sheridan Report on Twitter, the SheridanReport.com on the internet. $10 a day for the Sheridan Report, $50 for the entire month. Make sure you go check out MyBookie.Ag with the promo code TGT100. All right, guys, we're going to wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody you can hear us on Zeno Radio, the iTunes Store, iTunes app, YouTube, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Bobby Sheridan, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.